You know, I come back about every 3 or 4 years and no one gets any older. Wayne, you've been doing this for 25 years. Do you watch him when they're playing music? You need a seat just to watch him. Just to watch him, that's really good. It's good to be here. Great music. So I know some of you are disappointed when Dr. Young is not here. It's like when you were in high school and you walked into your favorite teacher's class and there was a substitute. So like a substitute, I'm going to give you all work to do. I'm going back to the office for 30 minutes, and I'll come back and dismiss you shortly. Dr. Young, this is, I think, the fourth or fifth time that he's allowed me, I say it's to have this opportunity is a great honor, to speak every time it's a holiday. I did New Year's on a Sunday. I've done 4th of July's on a Sunday, Mother's Day on a Sunday. And so when he asked me to speak today, about 5 or 6 weeks ago, I said, Dr. Young, it's another holiday. People don't come on a holiday. He said, that's why I've asked you. But you all surprised him today. It's Mother's Day. So everyone who's not a mom, okay? Not a mom or a grandmom. I want you to, no applause yet. Okay, I'm going to give you your moment here. All the moms and grandmoms stand. No applause yet. Please stand. All the mothers here today. Not yet, not yet. I want to see, yes, they outnumber us. Now let's all stand and give them a standing ovation. There we go. Pretty cool. I brought my Bible today, actually. Is my mom's Bible. She's lived to 90. She's been gone now for, hard to believe, 8 years, and I still have my grandmother's Bible. I was going to bring that, kind of for sentimental reasons, but it's kind of falling apart. I think it was in the 1886 or somewhere in there, the Bible goes back to. But a good remembrance for my mom today. There are a couple of scriptures about moms, and one of my favorites is this one. Let the team in the back pull it up. Can't see that light right there. There we go. I'll just read it from here. Proverbs 31, 28, 29. Her children arise and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. So of all the moms that stood up, they're all great. But your husband and your son and your daughter and your children and your grandchildren think you're the best one. Right? So all of you are the best one. All of you are the best one. Proverbs 31, 25, 27. Think about this as your mom. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom and faithful instruction. It's on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of the household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Now, what does that mean? That means that moms never stop. Right, moms? You're taking care of your kids. You're taking care of your grandkids sometimes, if they're there. You take care of your husband. You take care of your sister, maybe your brother. You take care of your friends on the street. Moms are incredible. They never stop. And they're always giving us instruction. Guys, I don't know about you. Well, you already answered that question. I don't know, but my wife likes to tell me how to dress. Have you experienced this, gentlemen? You're leaving the house, and she says, you're not wearing that, are you? And you say, of course not, dear. I just wanted to see if it still fits. What should I wear? Yeah. This was my third tie today. The first two didn't make the cut. There's another verse I love, and it's Isaiah 66:13. As a mother comforts her child, I will comfort you. So I want you to think back a little bit when you were a child, say 10 or less. And maybe you were injured. Maybe you were sick. Maybe something traumatic had happened. Someone at school treated you harshly. Maybe you made a mistake in the big game and cost the team. I remember it like it was yesterday. when my first dog died, and I cried for 3 days. Where do we run to? We run to our mother's arms. And they give us this warm hug. You all can remember it. Everyone has a story. It's probably, you did it many times. And she gives you this warm hug, and she tells you it's going to be okay. Don't be afraid. She loves you. She's always going to be there for you and never leave you. And it gives us comfort. And as great as that is, and it is great, it doesn't match the greatness of how much God loves you and how much Jesus loves you. And so, as we get older in life, maybe we don't always run and ask Mom for a hug, except on Mother's Day. But you can always run, no matter your age, no matter where you are, no matter the pain, no matter the issue. You know that you can run to Jesus, and He'll hug you. Deuteronomy 31:6 says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or terrified from them, whoever them may be, because the Lord your God goes with you always and will never leave or forsake you." So as much as that mother's love meant so much to you as a child, and still does for children that are here, and as adults, it's great. Some of you I know brought your moms here, and some of you came with your mom because your mom said, "Hey, go to church with me today." But Jesus is always there. And I just love that verse. I just love that verse. You know, there's a little bit of history to a Mother's Day, for those of you who don't know. There was a lady by the name of Anna Harris, or Ann Harris, before the Civil War in West Virginia, who started a Mother's Day work club, as if mothers didn't have enough to do. There was another lady named Julia Howard who tried to make Mother's Day a celebration in 1873, but it didn't get anywhere. And then the daughter of Ann Harris, Anna Harris, petitioned the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, and in 1914, Mother's Day became a day to celebrate on the second Tuesday of May, because that was the day her mother died. Interestingly enough, about Anna, she never married, and she never had any children. She dedicated Mother's Day, so she's the mother of Mother's Day, who convinced the president to make it a holiday, and never had any children. She was never a mother, but she said she did it to honor her mother. So I'm glad that all of your families are here to honor the moms and the grandmoms here today on this day. What's the Bible say about women? A lot of things. First of all, there are 2 books written, named for women, Esther and Ruth. Esther, of course, saved Israel. She went from an orphan to a queen. Amazing things that God can do. And then the book of Ruth about love and devotion and loyalty. Women in the Bible have always been at key moments with Jesus. Think about this. Now, we think about the Bible, most of the characters in the Bible, kings of the Bible, most of the people of courage who took on great challenges and great fights were men. But at these critical times when Jesus first came, it was Elizabeth who was there with her baby in her womb, who jumped for joy when Mary walked in pregnant with Jesus. So at the very beginning, it was the women who recognized Jesus at that moment, and her son in her stomach jumped for joy. And then, if you look at the stories in the Bible, you have so many stories in the Bible with women. Strong, courageous, needed Jesus' love to help them through a difficult time. There were lessons in every one of those stories. And then, of course, at the crucifixion, there were many women. And who was the first to discover the empty tomb? And who was the first to hear Jesus' voice and recognize it after the resurrection? It was Mary. So women have played such an important part of history, because the Bible is a book of history. When I was a child, someone said to me, maybe I was a teenager, he said, "What's the Bible, Dan?" I said, "It's the Word of God." He said, "What's Bible stand for?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "Basic information before leaving Earth." I've never forgotten that, and now you won't. Because it is a history book. I'm going to come back to that history in a couple of moments. The reason Dr. Young asked me to speak today was about 6 weeks ago, I was down at Second, the Woodway campus, and there was a gathering of pastors from around the country, and I was asked to speak. And I told a little story. I talked about where we are as a church, and Dr. Young called me back into his office afterwards. He said, Dan, would you be free on Mother's Day? I'd like for you to share that message. The message starts with a story, which you all know well. In the southern part of Texas, in the town of San Antone, there's a fortress all in ruin that the weeds have overgrown. You can look in vain for crosses, but you'll never see a one. But sometimes, between the rising and the setting of the sun, you'll hear a lonely bugle as the men go marching by as they answer to the roll call in the sky. Colonel Travis and Davy Crockett, 180 more. Captain Dickinson and Jim Bowie, President accounted for. Indians with squirrel guns and men with muzzle loaders, two together, heel and toe to defend the Alamo. You see, back in 1836, Houston said to Travis, get some men and go to defend the Alamo. Travis told them they may never see their loved ones. Those who want to could leave now, but those who are willing to fight to the death, let them stay. So in the sand, he drew a line with his army saber, and out of 185, not one soldier crossed the line. With his banners dancing in the dawn's golden light, Santa Anna and 5,000 troops came prancing. He was on a horse as black as the night. He sent a messenger to tell Travis to surrender, but Travis answered with a shell and a rousing rebel yell, and Santa Anna turned scarlet. Play de Guelo, he roared, I will show them no quarter. Everyone will be put to the sword. 5 days, 8 days, 10 days, Travis held and held again. He sent for replacements for his wounded and lame. But the troops that were coming with Fannin never came. So twice he charged and blew recall, but on the fatal third time, Santa Anna finally breached the wall, and he kept his promise and killed them all. Now the bugles are silent, and there's rust on each sword, and a small band of soldiers lie asleep in the arms of the Lord. In the southern part of Texas, in the town of San Antone, there's a statue of a cowboy as he rides there all alone. And he sees the cattle grazing where a century before Santa Anna's guns were blazing and the cannons used to roar. And his eyes turn sort of misty, and his heart is all aglow, and he takes his hat off slowly to the men of the Alamo, to the 13 days of glory, to the men of the Alamo. That story has traveled around the world over and over. In fact, I met some soldiers from Ukraine who were visiting, I don't know when it was. It was the end of last baseball season at the Astro game, and I was introduced to them. And I have these Alamo coins that I give out with Matthew 20:26 on the back. Says, for those who wish to lead, you must first serve. Because remember, Jesus came not as a king, but as a servant. And I handed these coins, and I give these coins to everybody I meet. I'm sorry I'm all out today. But some people say, what is that, the Capitol? What are they? Well, it's the Alamo. They knew what it was. Two of them did. One of them said, Davy Crockett. Those 8 or 9 men who were there were going right back to the front lines. They were here training in Texas. I'm not sure on exactly what they were training on with our military. But they were going back to Ukraine, and I pray they're still alive now, but they were going back into harm's way, just as the men at the Alamo did. Because the fight for independence and liberty and freedom has never grown old. Some say, well, Dan, the Alamo lost. They lost at the Alamo. But we won the war because of the stand at the Alamo. It was only a few weeks later before Sam Houston had enough time to defeat Santa Anna, San Jacinto. And most of the wars we have won in this country, we've lost some battles along the way. Pearl Harbor happened, but we had victory at the end. We've seen that. And what's it all about? It's about men making decisions based on the information they have and the cause that they believe in and willing to do whatever it takes to win. That's what it's all about. I was talking to David McCullough. If you've never read 1776, I'd order it off Amazon. It's a great book. It's about George Washington, told in a kind of a novel way. Great story of how Washington, after he was run out of New York by General Howe and the British, after 5 years of barely winning a battle, he eventually was victorious and was there at the surrender of the British at Yorktown. And he's written a book about Jefferson and Adams and the Wright brothers. He's a great author. And I was talking to him one day at a book signing after it was over, and I said, David, and I mentioned the word history and something I was saying in the sentence. And he said, Dan, there is no such thing as history. And I said, well, forgive my allergies. I said, what do you mean there's no such thing as history? You're a historian. You're an historian. He said, well, yeah, that's what they call me. But there's no such thing as history. It's only events in the context of time. And we diminish history when we look back on things that happened a long time ago because we assume it really wasn't that big of a sacrifice or that hard of a decision to make, or really, they didn't really risk anything. Because why? Because we assume they knew they'd win. We assume they knew they'd win. The founders, I mean, think about it. Well, of course we're going to beat the British. Of course America was going to be born out of that battle. They didn't know that. Those founders put their entire life on the line. Had Washington and Jefferson and Madison and Franklin, had they lost, then all of them would have been hung. Their property taken, their families put in jail or sent to a prison somewhere in England. They didn't know. 1861, Civil War began. Everyone assumes, of course, Lincoln knew he would preserve the Union. He didn't know. In fact, almost lost at Gettysburg. Came down to a one-day battle there that turned the tide of the war. So when we look back and we keep saying, of course we knew Lincoln, who was very tall compared to everyone else in those days. Of course we knew, or he knew he was going to win. No, he got the best information he could get. He risked it all. He put it on the line to save the country. On June 6, 1944, you've all seen Saving Private Ryan, or you've all seen D-Day, or The Longest Day. General Eisenhower. He had a tough decision to make. There he is talking to the troops the day before landing on Omaha Beach. He knew thousands were going to die, and thousands did die. He didn't know if he could get off the beach. And if he couldn't have gotten off the beach, the war would have lasted another few years, long enough for Hitler to have probably had his own bomb to blow up London or any other city. Hitler already had rockets and jets at the end of the war. Eisenhower made the decision based on weather forecasts, based on having hundreds of thousands stuck on boats, trying not to be seen, keep it secret so the Germans didn't know where they were going to land. So again, he didn't know how the next day was going to turn out. He made the best decision he could with the best information he had and took the risk for what? For freedom, independence, and liberty, no different than the men at the Alamo. And then on 9/11, George Bush stood atop the rubble in New York with that bullhorn. I know exactly where I was on 9/11. I was at Second Baptist Church with Dr. Young. That morning, we were having a men's prayer team. And Ed Hendy, who's a longtime member of the church and who's a pilot, came in and said, planes just crashed into the tower in New York. Okay. It was an accident, terrible accident, wonder what happened. And then a few minutes later, the second, and we knew it wasn't an accident. We knew we were at war. We didn't know who the enemy was quite yet, but we knew someone was attacking us. And I remember at the time, because I was still on the radio back in those days, I haven't done my radio show for 10 or 12 years, I guess. I haven't had time to do it. But I rushed to the radio station because I thought people are going to be tuning in. They want the news, and I need to know what happens. And before I could get to the radio station, the Pentagon had been hit. I can assure you that all of us didn't know what was next. And President Bush had to make a decision based on the information he had, take a risk, put it all on the line. We look back now and we say, well, of course we knew we'd eventually triumph, although we might argue today the battle's back at our doorstep for sure. But for that time, we prevailed. The point that David McCullough was making is that history is diminished if we look back on it from where we are in a comfortable spot. They were not. And for all of those people and many more men and women through history who have been courageous, we would not be here today. And so now the question is, where are we in 2024? And what does that have to do with us as Christians? In 2024, I don't know who's going to win the November election. I don't know who's going to win the Ukrainian-Russian war. I don't know who's going to win the Israeli conflict. I mean, look at Israel. And I'll come back to Israel in a moment. But this isn't the first time Israel has been attacked. I mean, you can go back through biblical history. Whether it was the Philistines or the Babylonians, the Romans, the Egyptians, the Persians, the Amorites, you name them. Israel has been under attack since its existence. Every time it's a nation, it's under attack. The why we'll talk about in a moment. But 2024, where do we sit today as a country? Borders wide open, 10 million have come in. We don't know who they are. We're doing the best we can as a state, trust me. Spending a lot of your tax dollars to do it, $4 billion or $2 billion every year. $2 billion. Doing the best we can. We know terrorists are crossing the border. I can just tell you this fact. In 2019, 342 Chinese men between the ages of 19 and 40 crossed our border illegally that we apprehended. Last year, 22,000. This year, 24,000 already. What are 24,000 people doing here from China at military age? So, danger. We know that wokeness has taken over the culture. I mean, I had to pass a bill to stop boys from playing girls' sports, really? I had to pass a bill to keep men out of ladies' rooms, really? You had to do that? We know that there's chaos in the world and chaos in this country, whether it's in our economics, whether it's on the border, whether it's in our military, whether it's even in the decision right now, whose side are we on in the Israeli war? I must tell you, I am shocked as an American, as a Texan, at the anti-Semitism I see everywhere on these college campuses. I have a young man who's Jewish on my team. He's 28. He said, Governor, I never ever thought I'd have to be afraid in America of where I should go or what I should do. And so, my point that I made that day talking to pastors is that what will history in 30 years from now say about us? What will history say about us? Will we prevail in Israel? Will we prevail in Ukraine? Will we finally secure the border and make our country safe? Will we start putting criminals, murderers, and rapists in jail and keeping them in jail in Harris County, which isn't happening these days? I mean, are we going to turn all this around? And what will they say in 30 years? Will they say, if we do, by the way, they'll say, well, of course they knew. That was just a bad time in America. Of course they knew they'd prevail. Well, I can tell you, if the church does not stand in the gap and fight, we will not prevail. We will lose the battle. The Bible, history, I wrote this book, not the Bible, I wrote a book called The Second Most Important Book You'll Ever Read back in 2000. I'm not a theologian, I haven't been to seminary, but I wanted to write a book basically that was a book for people who had never really read the Bible, and you kind of pick it up the first time and say, oh man, because if you happen to go the wrong book and start with Leviticus, you're probably done. It's like, I'll come back, next month, thank you very much. And when I was a young Christian, or maybe not a Christian, I don't remember, but there was a time, I had questions, I had doubts, trying to figure my way through my faith. And I remember the thing that jumped out at me was Jerusalem. The Bible has 66 books, one author, God, but many people who pen different books. How is it that that book, written thousands of years ago, has come together like this the Old and New Testament. How? How? If we all started a book today with all the computers that we have, and we had, so we're going to have 66 books in this bigger book, we're going to call it something, and I'm going to appoint 30 or 40 of you to write it, but we're going to write it over the next 2,500 years. And at the end of that, it's all going to go like this, where no one can ever disprove one thing in it. I would say impossible. Egos would get in the way. Different versions and different stories, different beliefs, different bias. But the one thing, and many things are consistent in the Bible. It's a book of teaching. It's a book of love. It's a book of forgiveness. It's a book of history. But if you think about just one thing, Jerusalem. Jerusalem. It's the one city, the one place that they've been writing for thousands of years would always be under attack. I named the many groups who have attacked Israel over the years. Every time they became a nation, they were attacked. Why? Because Satan does not want God to prevail, because in the Bible, God says he has a special plan for Israel. Special plan for Israel. Didn't name any other city. And remember, since that time, do you know how many countries have disappeared? How many lines have been redrawn? How many cities you've never heard of? You know, they were powerhouses. They don't even exist anymore. But Jerusalem, well, I've been to Jerusalem. It's a tiny town. It's a tiny place on the map of the world. So how is it? If they had picked any other city, you might be able to say, this book is not true. This book is true. Every word of it. And we know that God says those who bless Israel will be blessed. And here we now have a country that's not so sure they want to bless Israel, or at least some people in it. So what we have to understand and what is working in this country right now is the Marxist socialist left are ungodly people, and they don't want God in this country. And if we as a church don't wake up and really realize the fight we're in, then 40 years from now, they're going to say, they lost that one because the church stayed quiet. It's because the church stayed quiet. And I'm not talking about R's and D's. I'm talking about we stayed quiet on the basic principles of life that everyone agrees. One of the pastors that was at the group that I spoke to talked about how they put together this God ticket in North Carolina. It was a nonpartisan election. But here's what was on the God ticket. Do you believe we should have prayer in public schools and 10 Commandments? Do you believe that God should be in the public square? Do you believe countries should have strong borders, law and order, put hardened criminals in jail? Do you believe that parents should have a choice of where they send their children to school? Do you believe we should not have pornographic materials in our school libraries? Do you believe we shouldn't be sexualizing our children and trying to break up the family? Do you believe, do you believe, do you believe? If you had a God ticket, no R's or D's, that ticket would win. Because most of these people in this country do believe in the right things. But we're being muscled out by a loud minority that's on the march. On the march, and they've been this way for 40 or 50 years. The first thing you do if you're a Marxist socialist, you take over the education system, and we have a lot of great public schools, but we got a lot of problem schools across this country. Take over the school system, you know they have, right? When you see some of, there are books that I would be embarrassed to show you that are in our school libraries. If I brought them, Dr. Young wouldn't let me pass them out. They're so awful what are available to children. So take over the education system. The next thing, take over the media. Take over the media to tell a one-sided story. They've done that. They didn't quite get the courts yet, but they're close. Get the Supreme Court, and then they can outlaw anything. It wouldn't matter what law any red state or Texas passed. A liberal Supreme Court, if it were 6-3 today instead of 6-3 conservative, they would just override all of our laws. We say boys can't play girls' sports, they would say no, that law is unconstitutional. Whatever it is, they'll take away all of our rights. They've been on this march a long time, and now they're not even concerned that you know what they're up to. Not even concerned. So my whole goal in life is to make sure that my children and grandchildren inherit the world that we were given. That we were given. And so 52% of the people in America in the latest polls say they go to church every week. Only 50% are registered to vote. And only 50% of the registered vote. So if only 1 out of 4 Christians vote, we lose. If we're afraid to stand up as a church, we lose. And you won't recognize, or our children and our grandchildren won't recognize this country for their life. So when Dr. Young asked me to speak today, he said, Dan, share that story. Because the church has to be awake and we have to be alive, as it has been all through our country's history. And I'll be darned if I'm going to, on my watch, not as a lieutenant governor, as a father, as a grandfather, on my watch, I'm not going to let the left take this country and take all the freedoms and rights away from my children and turn this country into an ungodly country. So let's bring it back to moms. Proverbs 22:6 says, train your children in the way they should go, and they will grow old and not depart. Moms, we need you more than ever. Grandmoms, we need you more than ever. You're the ones we run to when we're hurt. You're the ones we run to when we need a hug. You're the one we turn to for guidance, because moms, God-loving, God-fearing moms, are the ones who teach their children and their grandchildren God's will and the purpose that God has for them, and the pathway that they have for their future, because God has a plan for all of us. And to the guys, we got to do our part. We have to stand and be strong like our wives and our moms, because I really do think they're the strongest sex. We may be physically strong, but you mess with the mother's nest, let me tell you, that's when Mama Bear comes out. Ecclesiastes 1:9 says, now I'm paraphrasing it, there's nothing new under the sun. It's a way of saying history repeats itself. So far, America, because we have been a Christian country primarily, because we have been a godly country primarily, because we have fought for our faith in our country and our families for the last 200 and some years, we have won. They didn't know it at the time, but we know now. And they leaned on God. I can guarantee you George Washington prayed, and Abraham Lincoln prayed, and Eisenhower prayed, and George Bush prayed. And I pray all the time. People ask me sometimes, Dan, when you have a hard decision, how do you make that decision? I just go to God. And if the decision isn't popular with the people, and so far my record's pretty good, but if it's not, I'd rather be kicked out of office than kicked out of heaven. It's real simple. I'm going to stand in the gap. So to moms, happy Mother's Day. I believe we have a bright future in this country because I believe God's people will stand. Let me close with a prayer, if I can. First of all, God, help me get up. I don't have anything here at all. Please pray with me. God, we know this prayer so well. 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and kneel and pray, and ask forgiveness for their wicked ways, and to heal their land, I will hear them from heaven. I will Forgive them for their sins, and I will heal their land. God, I used to think, I guess I was naive. When I read that verse and it said, if my people, I thought that was all Americans. And once upon a time, pretty much all Americans believed in God. But that's not the case anymore. So Lord, give us the wisdom and courage to stand and fight for your word, to stand and fight for our families and our country. Lord, give us the wisdom to reach out to those who don't believe, to show them the way that they can be forgiven of their sins. We need to reach out with love and kindness, but we need to be firm in what we believe and not ashamed to stand on your word. So God, we're ready to get in the fight. We're ready to stand for your word. And we thank you, Lord, for all the blessings you've given to this country, this great state, our families, and ourselves. Thank you for loving us. Thank you for forgiving us. In Jesus' name, thank you.